myself, I'm Matt Cockerell, the co-founder of Cookbook, and welcome to the latest in Cookbook's regular series of live streams and Q&As with our cookbook authors and food experts. And today we're really happy to have Bettina Campolucci Bordi, who is the author of 3 plant-based cookbooks, all of which are available on Cookbook. And Bettina blogs at a website called Bettina's Kitchen, and she is also teaches cooking through online cookery courses and works as a retreat chef. And she's going to be demonstrating to us some one of her vegan recipes, and also telling us some great ideas on sustainable and cost-effective vegan cooking. So I will now hand over to Bettina, who can introduce what she's going to be talking about.
Hi guys, thank you so much for the introduction. So I've written 3 cookbooks that are all available to you, and I'll talk you through them. This one is called Happy Food, and it's now been retitled and renamed Happy Vegan Food. It's my first cookbook, and the recipe that we'll be cooking today is from this. So this cookbook is a compilation of all my recipes that I would cook on wellness retreats that I've been involved in for the last 10 years. And it's sort of, some of these recipes I still cook to this day, and it's a great sort of good plant-based basics book. My second cookbook is the 7-Day Vegan Challenge. The recipe that I'll be cooking today is from Happy Vegan Food, and I was just saying before that the filling is a little bit bougie, but I'm going to talk you through that once we start cooking. There's a version of that recipe in my second cookbook that's got a more sustainable and sort of financially cheaper option as a filling in the second book. And then my third cookbook is called Celebrate, which is plant-based recipes for every occasion. We've got Christmas coming up now, so there's a whole Christmas chapter, which is one of the biggest chapters in the book. And basically, this book was born out of the desire to have people sit around a table, enjoy lots of food, regardless of food labels. So whether you're dairy intolerant or vegan or pescatarian, to be able to sit around a table and enjoy food. And sometimes it can be really difficult to host as well, considering lots of people have got lots of different dietaries nowadays comparatively to sort of 10-15 years ago. So during the cook along or the demo, you can ask me any questions. I specialize in plant-based cooking, and a lot of my recipes are also naturally gluten-free, although my last cookbook does contain gluten and flour, but lots of gluten-free options as well. And I guess one of the questions with plant-based cooking is protein. So the dish that I'm going to demo is a chickpea omelette. So basically we're going to be using chickpea flour as the base, and the secret to this recipe is combining bicarbonate of soda and apple cider vinegar, which is going to make the omelette really nice and fluffy. And going back to the filling, so it is from my first cookbook, which was written about 5 or 6 years ago when plant-based really took off. And the filling is a mango salsa with avocado. From a price point of view, that can be quite pricey. But the great thing about this recipe is that it's so versatile that you can fill your chickpea omelette with anything that's in season, ingredient-wise. And I'll talk you through that once we get going. So we're going to start off by making the salsa. And I've got a mango here, and we're just going to use half a mango for our salsa, and we're going to chop it up into small, nice. So this can be made as a brunch or as a quick lunch, even as a breakfast or as a dinner. I also run wellness retreats. So I've just recently come back from India, And it's really interesting in places like India, even in the UK, where you utilize and use different types of grains and pulses that are really protein rich and nutrient dense. Chickpea flour being one of those. So I've just added some mangoes into my bowl, and I'm going to add some chopped shallots that I'm just finely chopping up. There we go. I'm going to add that to the bowl. We are going to add some tomatoes. So I'm just going to chop that finely into small pieces and add our tomato. Tomatoes, funnily enough, now in the UK grow all year round. So you've got winter accessibility to winter tomatoes that grow in greenhouses. And one of my favorite companies is the Isle of Wight tomatoes. I'm sure that you guys have come across them. Just chopping some chili, adding that into a bowl, and I'm going to add a little bit of oil, a pinch of salt, and some coriander leaves. And again, in terms of herbs, you can use anything that you've got available. So I like to finely chop the stems because there's lots of flavor, and I like to use everything up. So not wasting anything is a big thing for me, and just using up as much as possible. So I'm just adding some of the coriander into the bowl, and we've got some spring onions that I'm also going to add in. I'm just going to chop this up because we're going to add that as a topping on our chickpea omelette. There we go. So I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to talk you through the omelette. Oh, there's a little thing that's popped up on my screen. There we go. Right, so for the chickpea omelette, we've got chickpea flour, also known as gram flour, very high in nutrients. It's cheap as chips. It's a great flour to work with. It's naturally gluten-free, and it contains lots of protein. One of the questions that you'll be asked when you eat more plant-based is, where does your protein come from? So this is a great way of using something that's nutrient dense and making it into a really easy dish. So we're going to add our chickpea flour into a bowl, along with some bicarbonate of soda and some turmeric for color to make it look more eggy. And also turmeric is a great spice. And we are going to add some apple cider vinegar. There we go. Sorry, I'm just going to close this down. There we go. And a pinch of salt. And what we're going to do is, I've got a non-stick pan, which is quite important. Have a good pan when you make this, because you don't want it to stick to the bottom. And I'm just switching it on, and we are going to add some water to this. So basically what happens is, when you use bicarbonate of soda, you want to use up the batter straight away, because otherwise it loses its potency. So you could potentially make this batter the day before and leave it in the fridge, but just leave out the bicarbonate of soda and add that just before cooking. So don't know if you can see, but what happens is, when the bicarb and the apple cider vinegar activates together, it becomes a nice sort of bubbly texture. And this is what's going to make the batter really nice and light. Something called soccer, which is sort of a flat chickpea bread. And this is slightly different because of the addition of the apple cider vinegar. You're going to end up getting a really nice fluffy texture of the omelette. So just giving this a mix. I've just put the pan on. I'm going to add some oil into the pan. I like using olive oil or British rapeseed oil is great as well. And I'm just going to turn you so that you can see what I'm doing. There we go. And I'm just going to add batter into the pan. So you could potentially get two omelettes out of this. I've got quite a small pan, so I'm just going to spread it out. And then hopefully this is going to come out nice and clean. So it's nice and fluffy. There we go. If you've got any questions, you can put them into the question bar. I don't know how many of you are vegan already. I think it's important to eat as seasonally and as locally as possible. I always say that one of the great things that you can do is to subscribe to a veg box, because you are naturally supporting your local producers, and also eating some great stuff that's in season.
I can answer the question about how many people are vegan. So we ran a little poll, and a quarter of the attendees are currently vegan. Lots of people are not vegan but interested in plant-based cooking, and about 10% often cook for vegan friends and family members. Great.
I think incorporating as much plant-based as possible into your diet is a great thing. It's always going to have a positive outcome, and we're very lucky in the UK that we've got some fantastic producers. So it's it's got nice and bubbly at the top, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip it. There we go. And it's nice and fluffy and bubbly at the top, and just going to flip that. I'm going to give the mango salsa a nice little mix. I've got some rocket here. And I'm going to switch the omelette off, because it's a little bit like a pancake. So basically, once you've flipped it, you've cooked the other side. I'm going to leave it to the side, and I'm going to slice up our avocado. And avocado is another thing. If you can get hold of avocados that are grown in Spain, that's a lot better. They don't travel as far. I used to live in Spain and used to be given avocados by the bucket load, and it used to be quite a thing on my social media, because we used to eat so many of these. So I consider them a treat. And as I said, I wrote Happy Vegan Food when I was living in Spain, and I've been living in the UK now for the last 5 years. So the filling for the chickpea omelette in book 2 is sauteed cabbage, and cabbage is something that grows here in the UK. So you could easily fill this omelette with sauteed cabbage, nice sauteed kale. You could do a butter bean hummus. There's some great producers here. There's a company called Hodmedods that do fantastic UK grown pulses. I like sometimes using broccoli and sauteing that off. So you can fill your omelette is basically a great vessel for lots of different fillings. So I'm going to give the salsa a bit of a mix. There we go. And I'm going to plate up the omelette. So basically, this is such a quick meal. I don't know if you can see this, but it looks great. So it's got, there we go. It's got the texture of an omelette. It's nice and fluffy. It's aerated. I'm going to add our mango salsa at the top with some lovely chopped avocado. As I said, I would consider this quite a treat. And you can fill it up with lots of different fillings, basically. And there we go. you've got your lovely filled chickpea omelette, which is protein heavy, it's nutrient dense, it's a cheap vessel in terms of what you can fill it with. You can top it off with a little bit of rocket if you want. And then, yeah, you can just totally play around with the different types of filling.
I had a quick question, Bettina. I'm just thinking about the mango there, and you've come back from India. Are there any ingredients which, when you're in India, sort of really, you know, change how you cook a bit, or catch your attention, or remind you that you really like cooking with them?
It was really interesting going to India, because I'm always very interested in sort of traditional cooking, and talking about things like protein, for example. They do dosas, which are made from different types of pulses with grains, and the mixtures are fermented and soaked. So I found that really interesting. And I suppose, because I was doing cookery classes in India as well, and what I found was basically what I've shown you today is a 10 to 15 minute way of getting the equivalent of a process that can sometimes take 2 days in terms of getting your protein content in. But very inspired by different spices, and also eating lots of different varieties of Indian food that tasted completely different to the stuff that you're getting in the UK in restaurants and stuff, for example, which was, I found very interesting, and just the different combinations. So I learn loads when I'm on different retreats.
Great. And it's worth mentioning that the latest feature we just released on the cookbook website is all about cooking of India, because we have dozens of books on the different areas of India and a whole different sets of styles. So yeah, digging into that, there's plenty on cookbook there too. What you were saying about the timing, like how this is a really quick dish, but sometimes it can be a lot more for certain sort of traditional dishes, a lot more preparation. We've got one of the questions which has come in is someone saying, when it comes to plant-based foods, sometimes find it difficult to be able to just throw things together. It seems more time consuming. And do you have any tips for the days where you just really want something, you know, really quick and to throw, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think stir fries are a great example of putting together something that's really quick. I think curries are a great example, or stews. The other thing that I find that's really quick is tray bakes. So anything that you've got lying in the fridge, if you just combine veggies, you could, in terms of a tray bake, you can just have whatever's lying around in your fridge, chop it up, stick it on a tray, add some pulse to that, like chickpeas or butter beans, and put it all in the oven. And then it's a really, and have that with a grain, for example, or a seed like quinoa or rice. Stir fries, really easy to just throw everything together. In terms of curries, I call my curries sometimes the sad vegetable curries. It's the veg that you've had the best intentions with that are in the back of your fridge, and chop all of those up, put that into a curry. I think it doesn't have to be complicated. The other thing as well is things like toast. Even toast can be something really simple, but if you top off a toast with a hummus and some roasted veggies, you've got a pretty complete meal that will take you minutes to put together, whether you choose to buy your hummus or make it from scratch. The other thing that I find is really useful is to pre-prepare. So if you've got a good curry base and a pesto, and planning is also good. Choose a few recipes on a Sunday and plan your cooking according to how busy you're going to be during the week. I find that really helps as well, and you waste less food as well, because you're planning your week. And
I was just going to throw in there as well, when it comes to finding quick options, it's worth, when you're searching across the whole of Cookbook, the filters not only let you filter, for example, by diet to get the vegan recipes, but there's also a complexity filter, which lets you choose simpler recipes, but also that includes, there's a less than 30 minutes option. So, and there's also a 5 ingredients or less option. So that kind of filtering to find really quick things if you're not ready for a major time in the kitchen is something which we can help you to sift through. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And also in terms of cookbooks, I would say the 7-Day Vegan Challenge is the cookbook that has the quickest recipes in and takes everything into account, and also has menu planning at the back. So there's a menu for sort of easy, moderate, and more involved, and that plans your whole week. And it's also got shopping lists. So there's several of my Happy Vegan Food and 7-Day Vegan Challenge have actually got shopping lists. And in the 7-Day Vegan Challenge, at the back, you can even print out the shopping list, and it's got tick boxes so that you can see what you've got at home already in your pantry. And you can just add the other stuff that you don't have into your shopping baskets, or take that with you to the supermarket.
And talking of supermarkets, Judith is asking how easy it is to get hold of chickpea flour. Is that widely available in supermarkets?
It is, yes. You can find chickpea flour in any supermarket. I know that a lot of things are London-centric. My parents-in-law live in Southport, just outside of Liverpool. So I always take into consideration what they've got available supermarket-wise when I write my recipes. So things that you can find in a Morrison's or a Tesco's or a Marks and Spencer or an Aldi or a Lidl. Yes, you can easily get hold of gram flour.
Someone just mentioned the same thing I was going to say, is that, yeah, it's got different names: Bizan flour, gram flour, chickpea flour.
Yeah.
Ultimately the same thing. And because it's such a big part, I guess, of Indian cooking, it's sold in big quantities,
yes,
both in supermarkets and in your local corner shop. Fantastic. We had another question as well, which was also around India. Did you come back with any unusual spices? And talking of sort of, I guess, flavors and combinations, how do you kind of come up with ideas, and do they always work?
Good questions. I came back with green cardamom that was extremely flavorful and smells amazing. Cinnamon, clove, and with some of the sort of masala spice mixes that were very, and I came back with something, I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's called peng or asafada, and you put a little bit in when you cook your pulses, and they become a lot easier to digest. And sort of when you eat plant-based and you sort of add a lot of fiber and pulses into your diet, you can experience things like flatulence, for example. So that really helps with the digestion. And you just put a little bit in when you are cooking. So I found it in its sort of natural format, but it's sold as a powder, and you can actually get hold of that in the UK as well. And I bought something called black salt, which is also called kala namak, which is a salt that has a sulfuric taste. So it tastes very eggy. So for example, if you're cooking tofu and you want it to taste eggy, you can just add a little bit of black salt, and that is also available to buy here in the UK. Speaking of adventures, I'm going to Ecuador next in November, just in a couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see what the cuisine is like there. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah. So Marianne asks, as a private chef, my challenge is often there is one vegan guest in a larger group. So what would be your go-to recipe in that situation as a fancy-ish dinner party?
Sorry, what was the question again?
If you have a big dinner party, but one vegan guest, but you want to have something special, any ideas for It ties in a little bit maybe with the celebrations book around kind of.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, there's a chapter in my book, Celebrate, called Dinner at Mine. And there's lots of canapé options and a lot of dishes that you can put in the middle that would not just be for vegans, but that everyone can tuck into. There's a Korean inspired feast, a Mexican inspired feast, where you've got lots of different components and you sort of build every mouthful, which not just vegans enjoy. I find that if you are veggie or vegan and you go to a dinner party and somebody cooks a veggie dish, especially for you, everyone else seems to dig into that dish as well. So I would just, it's great to just do lots of dishes and stick them in the middle, I would say, rather than doing things plated. And also don't label it anything. So yeah, there's lots of options in Celebrate. Favorite dish, there's a leek and tahini dip, which every time I cook that, it always steals the show. It's such a simple dish to cook, and it heroes leeks, which I love. There's some Hasselback Swede in one of the books, which is a 7-day vegan challenge. There's loads of things that you can put in the middle from Celebrate as well. One of my most popular dishes is my Swedish non-meatballs with carrot mash and gravy and quick pickled cucumbers, which is a version of, yeah, Swedish meatballs, but obviously completely plant-based.
Great. Marianne also asked, do you make any distinction really when talking about plant-based cooking versus vegan, or is it really just?
I think it's the same thing when you cook from a cooking perspective, but I think from a lifestyle perspective, vegan is usually a term for animal welfare, whereas I think plant-based is more coined for produce and where food comes from in terms of provenance. Whereas, yeah, I think, but it depends. It's such a great area at the moment because people are vegan or plant-based for several different reasons.
Then next is asking, back onto the question around proteins, maybe you could list a few of the sort of real good go-to proteins that maybe people don't recognize are quite, good options for vegan dishes.
So I think a lot of people don't realize that buckwheat, quinoa, teff, amaranth, and millet are not grains, but they're actual seeds, and they are high in protein and lower in carbs. So they are always a great option in grain dishes or used as flours. Teff is a fantastic flour that's not very expensive, used a lot in Ethiopia.
And we actually have a whole Ethiopian cookbook, vegan Ethiopian cookbook called Teff Love, which is pretty much revolves around teff. Yeah, so
fantastic. So yeah, and I think things like tofu people have a love-hate relationship with that, but there's also a product called tempeh, which is fantastic, which is a fermented soybean, and it's got a completely different texture to tofu. I think that is hasn't really hit, it's hit the market, but I don't think it's become a thing. It's not had its it's not had its day yet, but I think it's coming. I run retreats in Bali and have used tempeh a lot in plant-based cooking, and it's a fantastic source of protein, and it's got a really nice bite and taste to it. There's a company called Club Cultured that does a really good one that's produced in the UK. And just pulses in general, nuts and seeds. I think that we need a lot less protein than we think. and that I think that we get more than efficient enough of protein in our everyday lives, generally.
Great. Yeah, I know that Sampai Sri Owen's the author of the rice book from Indonesia, and she's a definitely a big tempeh enthusiast. So
yeah, it's great.
Work around to trying it out. I embarrassingly haven't tried it yet, although I am a fan of all the sort of tofu things, including like the tofu skin and things, you know, all different ways you can have tofu. So many different ways.
Yeah, it's great.
And I discovered you can buy it pre-fried, which is pretty good as well, because it's that sort of, you know, if you like the sort of texture of fried tofu, which is very different.
Yeah.
Quite nice to get it just, yeah. So that works well. We have a question on substitutes. For Rosa is asking about butter and margarine. What would you tend to be using there for preference?
Instead of butter or margarine, to be completely honest, I don't think there's anything good about margarine, to be completely honest. I prefer to use a deodorized coconut oil if I'm going to use it for baking. And you can also use olive oil for baking or rapeseed oil. I think I try to not use margarine as much as possible. It's just, yeah, it's, in my personal opinion, it's not a great substitute.
So Laurie is asking about, just back on the protein question, any thoughts on whether combining proteins to get a more complete protein is a worthwhile thing?
Yes, definitely. So if you look at it as a little triangle, and you've got, I use rice as one group because there's so many variations of rice, but it's obviously a grain, and a grain on one corner, and then pulses. If you combine a grain with a grain, or a pulse with a grain, you create amino acids, which are the building blocks for protein. So for example, if you are having a oat-based porridge, it's a good idea to add a tablespoon of another grain into the mix so that you get that mixture. And obviously in a lot of different traditions in South America and in India, they have been aware of this for hundreds or thousands of years and have been able to get their protein by mixing grains or pulses or grains with grains. So yes, it's definitely worth trying to have that combination in each meal if you are fully vegan, so that you get that combination to create protein.
Talking of pulses, someone mentions vegan pasta made, for example, with yellow lentils, and asking, yeah, do you have good experience with that kind of lentil-based pasta?
Yeah, so I actually have done some stuff with a company called Explore Cuisine, and they have some amazing gluten-free pastas that are also made from different types of pulses. They've got edamame spaghetti, they've got fava bean penne, and actually the trick to make that tasty is to have a nice sauce, but also to use plenty of water when cooking it. And it's just a different type of, slightly different cooking time to normal pasta. But it's a great way of adding protein into your diet and just making that pasta bowl slightly more nutritious than just using wheat pasta.
So one of the areas we were, you've touched on a little bit already, is about keeping costs down. And I guess there are, in general, vegan cooking, I think would tend to be cheaper than meat and fish is often one of the priciest things in your basket. But yeah. Are there particular ingredients and dishes which you think do a particularly good job of offering great value?
Well, I'm going to go back to chickpea omelette, great value in terms of price. things like curries, always great because you can use what's seasonal and local and cheap. And now that we're coming into winter, you've got lots of root veggies to choose from that are bigger in volume. So you're getting more for your money. And generally, I also think that buying in bulk is a good idea if you're then going to Asian or Southeast Asian supermarkets is also a great way of getting good and cheaper produce. Cooking in bulk, batch cooking, things like and making a bigger bulk and saving for later. But yeah, back to sort of stews, curries, pastas, but making that stretch a little bit further.
By the way, we just heard from one of the users that they've been meanwhile making the omelette and that it turned out great, and they used some spicy olives and microgreens instead of the mango salsa, but it was delicious.
Perfect. Great. Yeah, you can there's so many things that you can do. You can add different herbs and spices into your batter as well. Use chives. Again, if you want it to make it taste a little bit eggy, you can use things like nutritional yeast as well.
So in your book, Celebrate, again, we are sort of coming up to the holiday and Christmas season. Are there any particular things in there? Maybe trying to think different types of dishes or that you would recommend or worth mentioning.
Yeah, definitely. There's a whole section to make sort of a full Christmas plant-based Christmas table that includes, I call it a plant roast because I feel like nut roasts have been quite done. So it's made out of lots of seasonal and local root vegetables. It contains a little bit of nuts, but not nearly as much as a classical nut roast would. There's a gravy that's made from scratch. There's a creamy leek and potato bake. There's a fantastic red cabbage side. So basically you could create a full-on Christmas dinner with all the trimmings and not feel like you've been left out, and really have a nice centerpiece on the table as well to sort of celebrate. So yeah, the Christmas chapter has got some fantastic options. Lots of really nice sweets and bakes. I do a mince pie, so rather than doing a small mince pie, it's a big mince pie that you can slice into. That's fully vegan. There's a saffron bread that's inspired by my Swedish roots. So many options.
That links back to an earlier question, which we skipped over, but I was thinking this question of where you kind of get ideas from and inspiration. I was also going to ask if there are other, cookbooks which you've really enjoyed, or whether there are, particular, other vegan chefs you would recommend. But yeah, certainly where you get your ideas from.
Yeah, my ideas come from everyday life or from travels or from doing my different retreats. I'm sure I'll be getting ideas from going to the Ecuador retreat. I've had lots of ideas from my Bali retreats. I've lived in Spain, Sweden. I grew up in East Africa, so I've got lots of sort of different backgrounds that I dip into. And I tend to not look at too many cookbooks so that I stay neutral in terms of my own recipe development. But again, being in India, really inspired. I've got a phone full of notes. So I write a lot of notes on my phone and basically keep going back to those. Or if I feel inspired by something, if I've been to a market or a restaurant, or if I see a dish, I will keep hold of it in my notes. And then when I need to recipe develop or find inspiration, I'll go back to my notes and sort of decipher and figure out whether that would work for one of my recipes.
And am I right? Let me think. You also do some with working as a retreat chef. You also do some sort of in-person training and that kind of thing. I'm just wondering, what you've learned from that in a way about how to what's the best way to, or what are the most important skills to convey, or how do you help people become a good retreat chef?
Yeah, definitely. So I run a cookery school called the Retreat Chef Academy 3 times a year, and I teach people how to become retreat chefs because it's quite an acquired skill. You are at venues that you've never been to before. You need to source ingredients in a country that you don't necessarily know or have been to before, and it's all plant-based, and then you have to cater for different tastes. So it's quite a challenge. It's a very niche area. However, wellness retreats are growing in numbers and a lot of more people are going on them. So there's a clear need for good retreat chefs out there. So it's great.
Excellent. So on the, just thinking about your own cooking, you mentioned sweets and baking. Are there any do you yourself do a lot of the sort of bake and sweet things, or do you tend to mostly to savory? Is your heart more in one than the other?
Yeah, definitely more savory than sweet. Baking, I would say, is not my strongest point. There are definitely a few baking recipes in Celebrate, but I tend to stick more to savory dishes, and I'm more a savory person myself anyways.
We've got a quick question here, which I don't know if you have experience from, but maybe from India, depending on where you were, is that, do you have any experience of, it'll be relevant for Ecuador as well, any experience with cooking at high altitude?
Cooking at high altitude. When I was in India, we visited the Himalayas. So we went further up than a place called Almora. It was called Kamun. So yeah, it was quite interesting. It was a similar but different cuisine. So we did do a cooking class there, which was quite interesting. It's also an area that's very well known for growing hemp. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. Yes, so I guess I have a little bit of experience with cooking in high altitudes. Whether it would be something that's useful, I don't know.
Another question, with the vegan food, do you have any experience of seeking out vegan wine? Any recommendations on vegan wine?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, a lot of wines are now vegan naturally, because the sort of older methods are not as widely used as they used to be. So I think there's a lot of fantastic vegan wines on the market now, very clearly labeled on the back. And I think every single supermarket now has got a really good vegan wine selection. And some of them are unintentionally vegan. They just happen to be. Sorry, excuse me.
I've noticed I guess that's a bit similar to what's happened with confectionery and sweets. Many sweets have all gone vegan without necessarily making a big thing about it. But
exactly. Yeah, which is great. It's just it's a better switch, anyways. And yeah, if you can do it as a company or as a brand, you're much better for it anyways.
So one interesting question Vicky raises is not wanting to cook with the saturated fat in coconut milk, but wondering whether you can get coconut flavor using coconut powder and maybe making use of different plant-based milk. I'm not sure.
So not using coconut milk. You can very easily make a cream just whizzing up a handful of cashews with water in a high speed blender, or just a handful of almonds or a handful macadamia nuts are quite pricey, but even something like a handful of sunflower seeds with hot water, blitz that up into a blender, and you've got something creamy to go into your pot. Hemp seeds, whole hemp hearts is another one, really easy to just whiz up.
Great. So question more for you in terms of your background in plant-based cooking. Someone who don't know their name is asking, how long have you been focused on plant-based cooking? Had you previously eaten meat, and at what point did you make the switch?
I've been in the plant-based, in the wellness industry for the last 10 years. And because I started cooking and running wellness retreats, and also had a few health issues at the time, I went vegan and gluten-free, and was vegan and gluten-free for about 6 to 7 years. I am now predominantly plant-based. I'm no longer vegan and gluten-free strictly. I occasionally have a few animal-based products that are well chosen, depending, and yeah, I've also introduced gluten after being gluten intolerant quite severely for about 7 years, and I feel like your body goes through periods, and I am absolutely fine as long as I don't overdo it. So sourdough and more ancient grains I'm better with.
It's very interesting that there are certain sorts of intolerances which can progressively be overcome.
Yeah,
they're not necessarily.
Yeah, I was definitely not celiac, but I was quite, I think my body had enough of gluten for a while.
Mex is asking about if you've ever had any good experiences with vegan cheese, or whether you've tried making your own.
Yes, so in Happy Vegan Food and also in Celebrate, there are a few vegan cheese recipes, and I happen to be a bit of a vegan cheese expert. So there's the truffle cashew cheese recipe. I also have online classes on my website. There's a cheese making class and a plant-based basics class. Yes, really easy to make. It takes a few days to go through the fermentation process. If you want to age your cheese, you can do that as well. It's very, very simple. And I find that a lot of the vegan cheeses that you buy are full of things that are not so great for you. So it's a much better option to make your own. And there's recipes in the books that you can find.
I just shared it on the chat. That looks amazing, the truffle cashew cheese.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's a winner. That's a good one.
Any thoughts? What's next in your say? Do you have any cookbook plans? Is there a fourth part to the trilogy?
I'm working on some ideas, so we'll see what happens. Cookbooks take a lot of energy and time to write and to create. So I've got a few ideas. We'll see how that goes. But yes, there is something that, yeah, we'll see.
What are you going to be? Do you know what you're going to be having for Christmas lunch, dinner, or whatever?
Not sure yet. We've just decided that we're going to go up north and spend it with my husband's family. That is quite large. So I will probably be cooking a few dishes from Celebrate to put in the middle. It's quite it's a big family, so there'll be lots of options, and several from Celebrate, definitely.
Excellent. It's worth mentioning that at the end of this month, I think on the 28th or around then, we have another live stream coming up, working with Le Cordon Bleu, all around answering your questions on Christmas cooking. So that's going to be a fun one. Another question here from Laurie, whether your courses in general are they, in terms of their ingredients, do you think they end up being quite UK centric, or is it quite easy for anyone globally to follow those courses?
It's easy for anyone globally to follow those courses, for sure. The ingredients are really basic, but you can definitely find them anywhere.
I guess when you do the courses, you get a sense of where your your sort of the audience is? You know, are there particular regions? Do you have Swedish followers, or is it mainly in the UK right now?
Oh gosh, no, it's definitely global, and my books are global as well. So there's people from everywhere really, which is also something that I try to take into account when recipe developing.
Are there, I mean, we've mentioned India and Ecuador. Are there other kind of national cuisines that you look to, or you know, are interested in?
Definitely, I love Japan. I go to Bali once a year to run a retreat. I'm doing another one in February, which is very much food focused, and we collaborate with a ceramicist. It's all about the food and the vessels and where your food comes from, and I source everything from an amazing farmer who grows unusual things in Bali. So no, there's definitely a little bit from everywhere really. And for my background, I grew up in Sweden, East Africa. My mum's Bulgarian Danish, my father was Norwegian, so lots of influences meshed in. I lived in Spain for 12 years. So yeah, inspiration from everywhere really.
So from that very diverse range, there's a question of sort of bringing it down to fundamentals and saying, if there are 5 things you would always want to have in your fridge or cupboard as a plant-based cook, what would you kind of pinpoint as some real go-to kind of things to have on hand?
Salt, olive oil, salt, olive oil, lemon, salt, fat, acid will make anything taste.
Those are the things for making it. But in terms of, I guess, more durable things to as core components.
Gosh, I always have a good jarred beans is a good one to have. There's a brand called Bold Bean & Co that do amazing beans that taste really nice and are cooked properly. Living in Spain, they have a big pulse and bean tradition. Things like a good tomato sauce. I always have maybe 2 to 3 different types of pastas that are made from different types of pulses or seeds. So buckwheat pasta, quinoa pasta. What else do I have? I've got a very large pantry. So I sometimes I always have smoked tofu, which is a great little thing to have because you can put that on sandwiches, and even adding a little bit of that into a stew or a curry gives it quite a nice flavor. Tamari, which is a little bit more stronger than soy sauce, but it's essentially a soy sauce but gluten-free. But I think it tastes better than soy sauce. I always have that around as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been fantastic. There is so much information brought together and all those answers for those questions. And so we'll be able to, we've recorded the whole thing, and we'll also collate links to many of the recipes you've mentioned and some of those interesting suppliers. I think that's, you know, I've been really interested hearing about some of those, the sources to find really good quality things. And some of those recipes like the cashew cheese sounds amazing. So yeah, thanks very much, Bettina. As we said, all of those books, all of Bettina's books are on Cookbook, so do check them out. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to know about future Q&As and live streams from Cookbook, then just follow us on Eventbrite and sign up for the Cookbook newsletter as well. And you will be first to know about them. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye then.
Bye. Thank you.